They say history never really dies. It just hides behind the walls it built. Across centuries, royal blood has soaked the soil of palaces and prisons alike. But what if the echoes of those deaths never faded? What if the kings and queens who met the axe still walk the very halls where they fell? From the Tower of London to the guillotine squares of Paris, there are stories of footsteps that stop when you listen, and voices that whisper through stone. These aren't legends pulled from folklore. They're accounts, passed down, witnessed, and feared. Tonight, we follow the trail of executed royals, the powerful, the betrayed, and the damned, to ask one question that history can't answer. Do their ghosts still scream through time? Throughout history, the crown has always been a dangerous weight to wear. Royalty promised luxury, reverence, and divine right, but it also came with betrayal, paranoia, and blood. Thrones were won not only through birth, but through being cunning, and sometimes through murder. To rule was to walk a knife's edge, knowing that the same hands that crowned you could one day sign your death warrant. In medieval Europe, execution was not just punishment, it was performance, a public spectacle meant to remind the people that no one, not even a monarch, stood above the law. Treason, heresy, conspiracy, the charges varied, but the outcome rarely did. The blade, the rope, the guillotine, each one claimed its share of royal blood. And yet, death did not silence them all. There are those who believe that moments of intense suffering, of terror, rage, or betrayal, leave behind an energy that never truly fades. A place where royal blood was spilled becomes more than just history. It becomes a vessel for everything left unsaid, every cry that never reached heaven. The echo of a final breath can cling to the very stones, looping endlessly like a broken recording of the past. For every royal execution, there's a story that refuses to rest. Power and death are bound together in history's cruel theatre, and possibly in the world beyond it. When a crown falls, it doesn't just strike the ground, it leaves a mark on eternity. If there's one place where England's ghosts wear crowns, it's the Tower of London. Standing tall against the Thames for nearly 1,000 years, the tower has been many things: fortress, palace, prison, and execution ground. Its walls have witnessed the rise and ruin of kings and queens, its corridors echoing with the cries of the betrayed. The tower isn't just a monument to England's power, it's a graveyard of ambition. Among its most famous spirits is one whose story is forever etched in both history and heartbreak: Anne Boleyn. Once the radiant queen who captured Henry VIII's obsession, she became the symbol of his wrath when her crown began to slip. Accused of adultery, witchcraft, and treason, she was executed in 1536 within the Tower grounds. Witnesses claimed she met her death with calm dignity, praying for her husband even as the blade was raised. But death didn't silence Anne. Many have reported seeing a woman dressed in Tudor finery gliding silently near the site of her execution. Some say she carries her head beneath her arm. Others insist she simply walks, her face serene, her eyes fixed on something beyond mortal sight. In the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula, where she was buried, faint sobs are sometimes heard, soft, mournful, and undeniably human. Tourists who wander the grounds after dark often speak of a sudden coldness, a prickle of unease, and the sense that unseen eyes are following their every step. Yet Anne is not the Tower's only restless royal. Another tragic queen, Lady Jane Grey, often called the 9 Days Queen, is said to roam its shadowed paths. Barely 17 when she was crowned, her reign was short-lived, a pawn in the brutal games of Tudor succession. When Mary I seized power, Jane was imprisoned in the tower she once called home. In February 1554, she was executed on Tower Green. It's said she approached the block calmly, her voice trembling only once as she whispered, "Lord, into thy hands I commend my spirit." Centuries later, people claim to have seen her form shimmering near the Queen's house, where she was held before her execution. A figure in white, her face pale. In 1957, one yeoman warder reported seeing 2 spectral women, hand in hand, walking slowly toward the chapel, one believed to be Jane herself, the other her attendant. When he called out, they simply vanished, leaving behind only the faint scent of roses and a cold mist curling at his feet. And then there are the most haunting figures of all, the princes in the tower. Edward V and his younger brother Richard were imprisoned here in 1483 under the order of their uncle, the man who would later seize the throne as Richard III. The boys disappeared, their fate unknown, though few doubted they were murdered to secure their uncle's crown. Their small bones were allegedly discovered centuries later, buried beneath a staircase, though their true identities were never proven. Since then, countless reports have told of two young boys seen wandering the dark stairwells of the tower, dressed in nightshirts, clutching each other's hands. Their faces are pale, their eyes wide with confusion. Witnesses say they appear silently, stare for a moment, then fade into the stone as though swallowed by history itself. Some have heard childlike laughter echoing faintly in the upper chambers, though the rooms were empty and sealed. Even those who don't believe in ghosts admit that the tower has an atmosphere unlike any other place in England. Its air feels heavier, its silence louder. Footsteps echo when no one walks, doors creak open of their own accord, and a strange energy hums beneath the cobblestones. Psychics who've entered its walls describe overwhelming waves of sorrow, fear, and betrayal, a lingering residue of centuries of suffering. The tower's architecture itself seems to remember. The ancient stones are soaked with stories, each one a scar in England's royal lineage. Every block, every corridor, has absorbed the sound of pleas and prayers, the metallic hiss of blades, and the quiet aftermath of death. It's said that if you stand near the scaffold site on a still night, you can feel a faint vibration beneath your feet, as though the ground remembers the moment blood met earth. Even now, as tourists flood its courtyards and guards make their nightly rounds, those who listen closely say the whispers never stop. A low, rhythmic sound, half wind, half memory, weaving through the stones like a secret the centuries can't contain. It's as though the tower itself is breathing, carrying the voices of those who met their end within its cold embrace. Anne Boleyn, Lady Jane Grey, the Lost Princes. Their names may belong to history, but their shadows belong to the tower. And for those who dare to walk its grounds after dark, one thing becomes certain. The past here isn't dead. It's waiting. Revolutionary France was a country tearing itself apart. In 1789, the people demanded liberty and justice, but the same voices crying for freedom soon shouted for heads. Paris changed almost overnight. The royal palaces stood quiet, while the streets outside filled with mobs and smoke. And in the center of it all stood the guillotine, the new symbol of equality, cold and efficient, waiting at the Place de la Révolution. The guillotine didn't just kill kings. It changed how death felt. Its blade fell clean and fast, but the fear it left behind lingered. People came to watch as if it were theatre. Thousands of executions turned the square into a stage of horror, and that horror never really left. Even now, the ground where the platform once stood feels uneasy. King Louis XVI was the first royal to fall. It was a bitter January morning in 1793. The king climbed the scaffold calmly, his breath visible in the cold air. The crowd was restless, packed so tight that the noise blurred into a dull roar. When the blade fell, the cheering broke like a storm, yet those closest swore that the air dropped in temperature as soon as it happened. Some said they felt light-headed, as if the air itself had turned thin. For months afterward, people claimed to sense that same cold when passing through the square, sudden, sharp, and gone before they could speak. 9 months later came Marie Antoinette's turn. She had gone from diamonds and Versailles to a cell no larger than a cupboard. By the time she faced the guillotine, she was pale, exhausted, but unbroken. Witnesses said she apologized to her executioner for stepping on his foot, her last act of dignity. When the blade fell, the cheering was louder than before, but not everyone joined in. Some said it felt wrong. Others said they smelled candle smoke in the wind, though no candles burned nearby. That square, now the Place de la Concorde, has never fully shaken its past. Police officers on night patrols have reported hearing the thud of wooden boards, like heavy wheels being rolled across cobblestone. A few tourists have fainted there, claiming they felt pressure on their chests, as if someone invisible was standing too close. The area around the old execution site is colder than the rest of the plaza, even on hot evenings. You can test it yourself. Stand there for more than a minute, and the warmth drains from your skin. The hauntings spread beyond the square. Inside the conciergerie, the prison where Marie Antoinette spent her last days, the atmosphere is almost unbearable. The cell she occupied still stands, narrow, low ceiling, iron gate. Visitors describe an odd heaviness in the air, a quiet that seems to absorb every sound. Some have said they hear faint movement from the adjoining corridor when the building is locked and empty. Guards dismiss it as echoing pipes, though no one ever finds the source. Several witnesses over the years have described what they call the March of Shadows, a pattern of moving shapes crossing the same route the condemned once walked from the prison to the guillotine. These shapes appear around dusk, faint but defined, and move slowly forward before disappearing. Historians say it's imagination, a trick of light from the sane, but those who've seen it insist it's something else. In the Tuileries Gardens, not far from where the palace once stood, night workers have reported hearing voices when the park is closed. Not cries, not words, more like low murmuring, as if someone were reciting prayers under their breath. It stops when they turn on their torches, then silence. The same workers say that dogs refuse to cross certain areas after dark. No one can explain why. Skeptics argue that all of it, the footsteps, the whispers, the cold spots, are products of suggestion. They say the human mind fills in the blanks, that people want to feel something when they stand on ground soaked in history. And maybe that's true, but there's something about this part of Paris that unsettles even the most rational mind. It's not fear, exactly. It's awareness. The feeling that time didn't wash everything away, that something stayed behind and watches quietly from the edges. The guillotine is long gone, its wood and iron dismantled, the crowds are gone too. But every so often, when the city goes quiet and the lights fade against the river, there's still that chill in the air. Sharp, immediate, familiar. Some say it's nothing. Others say it's the revolution remembering itself. England and France may hold the most famous royal ghosts, but they're far from alone. Across Europe and beyond, echoes of executed royalty seem to follow the same pattern. Betrayal, violent death, and an unease that never really leaves the ground where it happened. Let's begin in Scotland, where betrayal and bloodshed were practically royal currency. Few figures are as tragic or as persistent as Mary, Queen of Scots. Her life was a tangle of political traps and personal misery, crowned as an infant, widowed young, and accused of conspiring in her husband's death. She spent years imprisoned by her cousin, England's Elizabeth I, before finally being executed in 1587 at Fotheringhay Castle. Her final words were calm, but those who witnessed her death said the executioner needed 3 swings of the axe before the job was done. The crowd never forgot the sound. Mary's body may have been laid to rest in Westminster Abbey, but in Scotland, her presence is said to linger. The Palace of Holyrood House in Edinburgh, her former residence, has been linked to strange activity for centuries. Staff have reported hearing footsteps in the old royal apartments long after the doors were locked. Security cameras occasionally pick up unexplained movement near the Queen's bedchamber, where Mary's secretary, David Rizzio, was murdered by her jealous husband, Lord Darnley, in 1566. The killing was brutal. Rizzio was stabbed more than 50 times, right in front of her. From Scotland, the trail of royal hauntings stretches east, into Russia, where the ghosts are tied not to castles, but to revolution. In 1918, Tsar Nicholas II, his wife Alexandra, and their 5 children were executed by Bolshevik soldiers in the basement of a house in Yekaterinburg. The massacre was swift and merciless. The royal family's remains were hidden for decades, their fate whispered in fear. Even after their discovery in the late 20th century, stories of their haunting refused to die. Locals living near the execution site have spoken of hearing voices in the woods at night, soft, indistinct, like a family murmuring in prayer. Some have claimed to see lights moving between the trees, too bright to be lanterns. Near the Church on the Blood, built where the killings occurred, visitors often describe a heavy sadness that settles on them the moment they step inside. Priests there have said that candles sometimes blow out on their own during evening services, even with no draft present. The tragedy of the Romanovs carries a different kind of haunting, less about fear, more about unfinished grief. For years, people refused to believe they were all dead. Imposters came forward, claiming to be the surviving Anastasia or Alexei. It was as though the nation couldn't accept what it had done. The ghosts, whether literal or symbolic, became part of Russia's identity, proof that the royal bloodline still cried out from beneath the soil. Back in Europe, Germany has its own royal shadow, Ludwig II of Bavaria, known as the Mad King. Brilliant, reclusive, and obsessed with fairy tales, Ludwig built castles that looked like dreams pulled from another world, Neuschwanstein, Linderhof, Herrenchiemsee. But his story ended in mystery. Declared insane and deposed in 1886, Ludwig was found dead days later in a lake near Munich, alongside his doctor. No one ever proved what happened. Visitors to Neuschwanstein say his ghost still lingers in the upper halls. Maintenance staff working after hours have reported the sound of someone walking upstairs, heavy and deliberate, when the building was empty. One worker claimed he saw a shadow cross a lit doorway, even though the door was locked from the inside. The castle's grandeur doesn't make the atmosphere lighter, it amplifies the loneliness. Every hall feels too large, every sound too distant. Across the world, similar stories surface, traces of royal power that refuse to rest quietly. In Thailand, the spirit of Queen Sunanda Kumari Ratana, who drowned in 1880, is still said to haunt the banks of the Chao Phraya River. Her death was a national tragedy. Because royal law forbade anyone from touching a member of the royal family, no one dared to save her as her boat overturned. The guilt that followed became legend. Locals say that on quiet nights, when the river is low, you can hear the splash of oars where there are no boats. Even Japan has its echoes. The story of Emperor Antoku, a child ruler who drowned during the Battle of Dan no Ura in 1185, is one of the country's oldest royal hauntings. His body was never recovered, but the nearby waters are said to remain restless. Fishermen claim that storms rise suddenly and violently there, as if stirred by something beneath. At the nearby shrine built in his honor, offerings of dolls and children's toys are left every year, to calm his spirit. What ties all these stories together is not coincidence, but emotion. Power, loss, betrayal, these things leave traces. When people die violently, especially in moments that reshape nations, those emotions don't vanish with the body. They hang in the air, in the earth, and in the collective memory. Every country with a crown seems to have a ghost that bears it. And maybe that's what haunts us most. Not the idea of dead royals wandering their former halls, but the history that won't let them go. The Tower of London, Versailles, Holyrood, Yekaterinburg, each of these places reminds us that even the most powerful are still flesh and bone. That their deaths weren't just political, they were human. Walk through any of these sites after dark, and you might not see anything, but you'll feel it. A weight in the air, a moment where time feels slightly wrong, as if something unseen is still trying to finish a story that ended too abruptly. These ghosts aren't here to frighten, they're reminders. That crown's rust, thrones crumble, and history never really stays buried. And that's why these tales endure. Because they're not just about dead monarchs or old castles, they're about us, about guilt, loss, and the uneasy truth that power never protects anyone from fate. The ghosts of executed royals don't need to scream to be heard. History does it for them, every time we remember.